What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me today as always. Have you ever been so excited about a firearm that you start acquiring accessories for it long before you ever actually get the firearm? Well, I'm like that too. I knew the Sig Sauer P365 would arrive eventually, although it's been a long time coming, so I reached out to my buddy Harry at Harry's Holsters and said, "Hey man, I've got this gun on the way. Do you by any chance have a holster for it?" And he said, "Absolutely." So he sent me this awesome dark tan faux leather holster so I can be prepared for that P365 when it arrives. So I want to give a really big shout out to Harry at Harry's Holster. The link is down below for his channel and his website. And I also want to give a huge shout out to Frontier Justice here in Kansas City. They've got two locations, one in Kansas City, Kansas, and one in Lee's Summit, Missouri. They allowed me the opportunity to get a hold of that P365 as early as possible. So just a huge shout out to both of those. Links down below for both of them. Be sure to check them out and give them some love. And now on to the review. We've spent a fair amount of time talking about the various guns and accessories coming out of SHOT Show 2018, but one gun that has caught the attention of a lot of people is the Sig Sauer P365 for a couple of reasons that we're going to talk about here. So I've been very excited to get my hands on it. It took about a month to wait since its initial release, but it's finally here. So we're going to dive deep into this thing and talk about all the features and specs. We'll look at shooting, of course, along the way. We'll talk about the trigger. I'll disassemble it for this one because there are a couple of potential problems with it I want to make sure you guys are aware of as well. So in terms of specs, the overall length is 5.8 inches. The height is 4.3 inches. The barrel length is 3.1 inches. The width, and I'll give you a good look at that, of course, is 1 inch. The weight unloaded, and here's where you can really start to appreciate the small size of this firearm. It's 17.8 ounces, so I would really classify this as a micro 9 pistol, but there's a little bit more to it than that. The magazine capacity, and here's where the outstanding feature, or really the thing that caught everybody's attention, this is actually a 10-round firearm, and although I say micro pistol, and it even competes with a lot of the single stacks, this falls somewhere kind of in the middle, being basically a double-stacked 10-round magazine. Now, of course, you get two magazines out of the box here. Second one, now this second one has a little bit of a finger extension on it. You don't get any more rounds with it. However, I understand that Sig Sauer now has the 12-round magazines available. They're a little bit pricey, just so you know, but it's nice that they've got some flexibility with that. Now, the slide finish on the P365 is a nitron finish, as you would expect from Sig Sauer. It goes along with a lot of its older or bigger brothers. The frame material is polymer. Now, one unique thing about the P365, the trigger assembly or trigger module in here is actually removable. Now, Sig says basically don't do that right now. There aren't any other grip modules or anything available. Maybe they will have more coming down the road at some point in time, but the serialized part, nonetheless, is actually the trigger group, which does come out. So I would say for the time being, just leave it alone, but we'll see what happens down the road. Now, of course, it's striker fired, as you would expect, like a lot of its competition, and I might wheel some of those in here before too long. And in terms of safeties, you'll notice there's no external safety, no thumb safety or anything like that, plus there's no safety lever or hinge trigger. All the safeties are internal, and then also your finger and your mind, of course, as we all know. In terms of features, there are a lot of things to talk about. We'll start with the grip as usual. You'll notice that the grip texture on this, and I would classify this grip texture as absolutely fantastic. It's mildly aggressive, which is great, and it goes all the way around front, back, and side, so hopefully you can see that at least a little bit. It really grabs your hands very nicely. However, from a concealed carry standpoint, I think it's soft enough to where it's not going to beat up either you or any clothing or anything like that. So I think they did a great job with this grip texture. I'm really impressed with it. A couple of other things about the grip here. You'll notice there's an undercut here right under the trigger guard to allow your hand to get as high up as possible, as well as a nice cutout here on the back strap as well. So from an ergonomic standpoint, of course, there's a little bit of a recess here for your thumbs on both sides. Ergonomically, I think this really is fantastic. fantastic. I think it feels really good in the hand. Now, one thing that some people have noted, and several people have handled this here locally when I purchased it, they've noticed that there are a couple of ledges or points here on either side, and depending on the size of your hands or how you shoot this, they could kind of eat at you just a little bit. I haven't noticed that, and I put 250 rounds through the inaugural shooting, so to speak. I didn't have any discomfort or pain whatsoever, but it might be something to be aware of. I'd be curious to know if other people have experienced that as well. Another nice feature, you'll notice that there's a little bit of a cut or a recess here at the magazine base plate, and it's just to clear any malfunctions or anything like that. So for such a small gun, it's great to have that feature in there. I mean, I think Sig has really tried to throw as much into this as they possibly can, even considering its size. The magazine release is pretty standard, give you a good look at that. Now, it is not ambidextrous out of the box. However, you can flip it around like a lot of the other Sig Sauers out there, which is great. So a little bit of flexibility. However, with the slide lock, slide release here, it is not ambidextrous out of the box. Now, I'm going to get rid of the magazine for a while. In terms of slide lock or slide release, I did use it as a slide release a couple of times. It worked just fine. Didn't have any malfunctions or any mechanical problems, anything like that. So, and it's positioned to where it really is very nice. It's easy to get to with your thumb. So they did a great job with that, I think. In terms of your disassembly, and I will disassemble this gun, however, I'm going to do it after the shooting because there are a couple of potential issues to be aware of, but it does have your standard flip-down lever like you would expect with a lot of the other competition and Sig Sauer firearms as well, so stay tuned for that disassembly. Now, it does have an accessory rail for lights, lasers, grenade launchers. However, it looks just a little bit different. It's actually capped off at the end because Sig Sauer, from what I understand, will have some proprietary accessories that you can put onto this, whether it's lights, lasers, maybe even grenade launchers. I don't know just yet, but I think those will be coming if they are not already available when you're watching this video. So, again, something to stay tuned for. Now, in terms of the slide, a couple of things. It does have rear and forward serrations, which is fantastic. They're usable. I mean, they do a great job. They're not too bitey, not too aggressive, however, aggressive enough. And with this slide finish that's very matte, I think it really allows you to manipulate this gun if you need to. Now, another outstanding feature of this, I'll give you a good look at this sight lineup. I want to call this kind of a 1.5 iteration of the P365. They are now shipping with the Sig X-Ray Sight, so give you a look at that front as best I can. It is a high-def green sight. Now, it does have a tritium vial in the middle of it, and then you've got your rear sights, and they also have tritium vials, and they are serrated for glare. I think it's an absolutely fantastic sight lineup, and it's very similar to something like a Sig Legion or a P320X Carry. I've gotten to really appreciate that sight lineup, so I'm glad that they're now putting these on. Now, if you have an early P365 and it doesn't have these sights, contact Sig, and from what I understand, they will send you a set of these for free. So good on Sig for upgrading those sights, and they even have a little bit of a ledge for one-handed manipulation. So again, in terms of features and build quality, it seems like it is absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's comfortable to hold. It seems like a really good, solid gun. And again, I'll take it apart here in just a little while, and we'll talk about the trigger. But before we do any of that, let's take a look at a little bit of shooting and see how this guy does. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that footage at the range. So from a shooting perspective, the P365 is a ton of fun to shoot. It really is. It's ergonomic, it's accurate, far more accurate than I am, as you guys know, and it just is a lot of fun. Now, there were a couple of observations I made about this firearm even before shooting, and that was just handling it, and other people handling it as well. And it all comes down to the slide and how low this slide sits on the firearm. So when people generally grip firearms, the grip of the day anyways is to have a thumbs forward grip. And if you'll notice, I'm really riding up on that slide quite a bit, so I'll give you a couple of angles there. And most people that have picked this up have done basically the same thing. And I wondered right off the bat, is that going to be a problem? Is that going to impede the slide? Is it going to slow it down, cause malfunctions, anything like that? So when I did my shooting, and I wanted to make sure that I gave this gun every fair opportunity to work and not cause any malfunctions myself, what I basically did was with this faux accessory rail right here, I used that as my reference point for my thumb. So instead of riding high, my thumb is actually riding pretty low. And it took me a little while to get used to that, but once I realized that that is my reference point, you can feel it really pretty well. I mean, it's absolutely there. It worked very nicely. So basically when I'm shooting, I'm not impeding the slide at all. So everything is working really nicely, but I still have some control with my thumb. So just something to be aware of as you're shooting. Now, it's a really small gun. So I noticed that I was making micro adjustments as I was shooting. So I would occasionally have a little bit of a flyer, and you guys probably noticed that. Again, it's because this gun is so small, and trying to figure out, again, that placement of the thumb and the grip and the finger. Normally I wrap my finger through like this. So I can't on this gun because it's so small. So just some micro adjustments and getting used to that. I mean, I think it's got the potential to really dial in, and it won't be a problem. And again, being very accurate, I think it won't be an issue. So a little bit more time needs to be spent with this. But in terms of the trigger, let's talk about this for a moment or two. A lot of people have said that the P365 has a phenomenal trigger on it. I agree with that. So let's take a look at this for a moment or two. So we've got a little bit of uptake here, and I'm going to be quiet for a moment. There is no grit. There's no rubbing of any parts or anything like that. It is exceptionally smooth. And then once you get to your wall, which is very defined, we've got our break. It's a nice, crisp, audible snap. There's a little bit of travel there, but it feels really good. And then for our reset, very crisp, very audible, very tactile, and then back out to the start. So if you're really into resets and triggers and all that kind of stuff, I mean, I think this really fits the bill, especially considering how small it is. So once again, your uptake and your wall, there's your break, and then you reset and back out to the start. Again, from an out-of-the-box trigger, this is pretty fantastic. I've been very impressed. Now, it measures somewhere between 5.5 and 6 pounds, depending on how I'm pulling this. So it's not an exceptionally light trigger, but considering it's so clean and smooth, I think it's fine. And for a carry gun, 5.5 to 6 pounds is perfectly acceptable in my book. So kudos to Sig for really dialing in on this trigger. Now, one thing I told you guys I was going to do is disassemble the firearm. That's absolutely true. I want to make sure you guys know how to disassemble this and kind of a quirky reassembling a little bit, but also talk about a potential problem with this. And you guys are probably already aware of some of the problems. You've probably seen some of Harry's videos out there. So we've got our takedown or disassembly lever rather, and you just put that down and then release your slide, and everything pops right off. Not a big deal. And you've got your standard components in here as you would expect: your barrel, your slide, guide rod and spring assembly, and your frame. So everything disassembles very easily. It's easy to maintain this. A couple of things I've noticed: it's exceptionally clean on the inside. Now you'll notice it's a little bit over lubed right now. I tend to do that with new firearms, and then I taper it off over time just to get some of that oil soaking into the metal. And again, easy to clean, easy to disassemble, not a problem at all. The same thing with the frame as well. Now you'll notice that there are full-length rails there just to add a little bit of rigidity while shooting. And kudos to Sig for doing that. I think they did a great job. And all the components are very clean and again, easy to maintain. I'll reassemble it here in just a moment because there's a quirk with that. But before I do want to talk about a potential problem. Now, one thing, and I'll get this stuff kind of out of the way here. Some people have noticed, and I'm going to be wheeling in a couple of close-up pictures with this, but on the inside, right before you get to the end of the slide right here, a lot of people have noticed that there's a little bit of peening that's going on both sides. And again, have some of those pictures up. I've actually noticed that with this as well a little bit. So I'm a little disappointed with that, and I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on it. Again, I've got 250 rounds through it, so I'm going to put a couple hundred more rounds through it and see if anything changes at all and try and document that. And if for some reason it continues to go, I will probably ship this back to Sig because I think they've got some remedies for that. I think they make some modifications to the barrel and the recoil spring, that sort of thing. So I'm going to keep an eye on it and see how it goes. Again, no malfunctions or anything like that at the range, but something for all of you guys to definitely be aware of. So when you put this back together, your barrel goes in just like normal. Your recoil, guide rod and recoil spring goes in. Make sure it's centered, of course. Now, one little quirk with reassembling this, you'll notice that the takedown tab or the disassembly lever has gone back to home, and it actually won't go back down. The only way to make this go back down is to lift up on your slide lock slide release, and then it'll go down, because these guys are actually, they're kind of related to each other. One moves the other. So I find that very interesting. But now that it's down, it'll stay down. And what I do is I actually push this forward with my thumb, and then I get my slide and I put my slide back on. I'm still pushing forward on that takedown lever. Lock it back, put my lever back up, and then we're good to go. So that's reassembling the firearm. And again, just guys, something to be aware of. Keep an eye on those spots on the interior of the slide right there. So what do I think of this Sig Sauer P365 so far? Well, guys, to be honest with you, so far I've been extremely impressed. Between the ergonomics and the sights and the shootability of the firearm, the build quality, I think it's absolutely fantastic. Now, I say that with a caveat, of course, because I'm going to be keeping an eye on that inside of the slide and the barrel and all that, just to see if anything happens. So a little bit of a concern there, but with any luck, it just has a little bit of a break-in and had to work some of those parts in, and perhaps it's going to be okay. I'll keep you guys updated on that. But aside from that little issue, I really think that 365 has the potential to be, and I use this very loosely, potentially a game changer because of the capacity and the size of the firearm. So I think it's really challenging other manufacturers to perhaps go back and revisit some of their small firearms and see if they can do something similar with that. And of course, competition is fantastic. It just makes the options that much more exciting. So guys, I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about this. Be sure to leave a comment down below and sound off. Be sure to check out Harry's Holsters. Of course, his link is down below as well. So I'm excited to read those comments from you guys. Always a pleasure for that. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.